Right now, though, a question for you. 301-230-0980 is the phone number. 301-230-0980, where we ask you this simple query. We know that people are watching women's sports in record numbers, and specifically this season, watch women's college basketball in record numbers. 14 million on Friday night on ESPN for UConn, Iowa is the biggest game that they've ever had, basketball, period. The biggest, or second biggest, I believe, non-football event they've ever had on the network. We've seen what Dawn Staley has built in South Carolina, where they sell out their arena every single night. You see Iowa season start this year at Kinnick Stadium, their football stadium, where 55,000 came to watch Caitlin Clark and company. Even outside of basketball, this weekend, the She Believes Cup in Atlanta, U.S. Soccer versus Japan, they had 50,000. It was the largest crowd ever for a friendly for the U.S. women's national team. We know women's sports are growing, but specific to college basketball, to women's college basketball, there is unquestionably a Caitlin Clark element. She is a star of stars. She is a unique talent that plays the game in a way that is not just incredibly productive, as she just continued to smash every record in her sight, and, by the way, do it while leading her team to heights that they had never been before. So it wins, it's productive, and it's entertaining as hell. Who doesn't love logo threes? Who doesn't love the kinds of passes that she makes? The way she plays the game is an attractive style of basketball, up-tempo, and it's worked from I don't call it a PR, but it's worked from an aesthetic standpoint throughout the history of the game. Think of some of the most popular teams that we've ever seen. The Showtime Lakers certainly come to mind. The current version, or the recent iterations, I should say, of the Warriors, led by these flashy passing point guards. And while Steph Curry and Magic Johnson stylistically are extremely different, that ability to push pace and make plays that Clark also has made her must-see TV. And I can guarantee you that while I did carve time out of my day on a random Wednesday night in the middle of the year to watch Iowa on the Big Ten Network, I won't do that next year. There is a ton of star power behind her in college basketball on the women's side of things. Kiki Rice, the D.C. native who is out at UCLA, star. JuJu Watkins could very well 3 years from now be challenging a lot of Clark's scoring records. She's that good. She's just phenomenal. And showed it as a freshman. Obviously, Paige Bueckers at UConn was actually the number one player in Clark's recruiting class. And if not for her injuries, we might be talking even more than we already did about Clark and Bueckers. There are still Flau'jae Johnson at LSU. Pick your player at South Carolina outside of Camila Cardozo, who should be a top 5 pick in next Monday's WNBA draft. The star power is undeniably still in the sport, but none of them are Clark. And part of that is the novelty of Clark being the first one to break through, or the first one in a while to break through in this way. And there are tremendously deep conversations to get into about why Clark did that beyond the basketball. And I don't really want to get into all of those right now. But really the question I have at 301-230-0980 is, will you continue to watch? Because I do think these types of things, having been an observer and coverer of women's sports since my career started, these things, it's not even going in waves. It tends to be a stock market style of growth. There is a peak that is sparked by a singular event or series of events or players or teams, such as the 2019 Women's World Cup team. Saw a massive uptick in the growth of women's soccer popularity in this country. And as a result, what happens is some of the forces that hold the sports back then remove themselves. Biggest one being investment. All of a sudden, the demand is there. People are filling stadiums and desiring better TV coverage and all of the things. And sponsors are like, well, shoot, if there's people, then there's money to be made. And all of a sudden, there's investment in the sports. And even though some fans will treat it as a fleeting moment in time, others will stick around for the long haul. And that's really the question I would like to answer is, like, how many of y'all are around for the long haul? How many of you are saying, I see what Caitlin Clark did, and while that was the door in for me, that let me watch Paige Bueckers, that let me watch JuJu Watkins, that let me watch a style, maybe even it's a style of basketball that is more appealing. You watch a lot of the women's games are higher scoring and played in a much more, to me, like if you love the game, purist basketball way. And that's not to say like, oh, they're not dunking, like that's not even like coded language. Just like the fun, like a lot of the men's college basketball circuit is very AAU style isolation, or just like terrible college offenses. And I feel like there's been more innovation on the women's side of the game, like schematically. And so maybe that's the appeal to you. It could be any of these things. It could be none of these things. But how many folks are around for the long haul? Because I think what is changing, obviously, is the investment. And that is going to matter. There is unquestionably an investment element to this that is leading to the popularity. You have to show people the thing so that they can like it. And ESPN has taken it seriously. And they've had various levels of serious over the years. But I mean, I think one of the breakout stars of this NCAA tournament, outside of Clark, who had already broken out, and some of the other players that all of a sudden people got to see more of, is Elle Duncan and Shanae Ogwumike and Andrea Carter, who suddenly people are recognizing might be the best studio show in America for any sport. What those three did, and you add in Carolyn Peck and Aaliyah Boston for the Final Four, but those three throughout the tournament, like studio television around sporting events doesn't get better than that. And that involves investment, not just in the right talent, but in producers and the types of behind-the-scenes executives to make a show like that pop in that way. You can't replace the talent. You can't replace the fact that the chemistry between those three and Shanae and Andrea are just stars. Elle is the perfect host for it. Like, all of that stuff matters, but it starts with giving them a chance to do it. Doing 2 minutes with the broadcast crew for a 7:02 tip and starting the telecast at 7 versus starting it at 6:30 and giving them a half-hour pregame are very, very different levels of investment. And it allows, through that, to kind of foster the environment that sports grow in, where we have debates, where we get to know the players that are invested in their storylines, and all of these things that we've seen fluctuate in other sports. To take it away from, the men, women, whatever, like, there's a reason the NHL, after years of declining ratings and declining interest, was like, we got to get back to ESPN. Because as much as ESPN isn't what it was in the 90s and early 2000s, when SportsCenter was king and, the media environment was very different, ESPN's still the kingmaker. ESPN is still, to use their words, the worldwide leader in sports. And I think women's college basketball's place on that network matters a lot. It's why I think the National Women's Soccer League was brilliantly smart to make sure that ESPN ABC was a part of their package. It's why the NHL went back. It's why MLB won't leave. It's why, the NFL, even though ESPN is the lowest in terms of rights holders, in terms of the number of games, I guess they're right there now with Amazon, where it's you get to one game a week, and then, sometimes the ESPN has doubleheaders, and then they're going to have the playoff game. ESPN and the NFL have had a great relationship because ESPN gets all the rights. You'll notice if you watch SportsCenter for the NCAA tournament for the men, there's very limited highlights. The sharing isn't there. The relationship, or like the Olympics, right? ESPN will only pay for certain stuff, and they have for years been like, we want to be able to show as much NFL content as humanly possible. There's no rules, no restrictions, basically, on what they can do, and that has helped in the growth of the sport. And so there's ultimately, like, those are a lot of the factors to me, but there is still an amount of, like, icing and cake here. And if Clark's the icing, like, we got a mountain of icing. How much is getting chopped off?
What's up, kiddos? It's your boy Clinton Yates from ESPN. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Tell your mama I said what's up.